Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Voices from the Desert. With your very popular hosts. That's what I'm trying to say. Guests. But we're not guests on our own podcast.
We could be.
Very popular hosts. I'm Joshua Hoffer with Wind Ministries, and I'm with my dear friend Murray Dewitt with Samuel's Mantle. And we've journeyed together for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, wow, it's a long time already.
Learned a lot from each other, and so we love having these conversations about the journey of knowing the Father's heart, and with how that informs all the things about our lives. And both of us love the aspect of the charismatic church and the charismatic movement that made prophecy a commonplace, and personal prophetic ministry and intimacy with God and all these things put an emphasis on there in the evangelical church. And so the charismatic movement brought that 60s, 70s, 80s, and we've been able to glean so much from that. And so, but the last, if anybody that's been tracking with the podcast, you'll know that for the last 10 or so years, this hunger and desire that's been awakened through studying some of the early church fathers, the desert fathers, the Christian contemplative authors, and being influenced by some of the Eastern authors in Christian history. And, it's just created within us a hunger to know the Father even more deeply. And we've talked through that. So anyway, Murray, what's new in your world? Anything going on over in the vegan animal farm area?
Wow. Well, we're hoping that
you fell into a pond, or you fell into a trough.
Oh yeah, I should tell everybody that story. What a series of catastrophical. I should be a word in this case. Events. Because it was
catastrophic. I think is the word you're looking for.
It just sounds more like what happened. So we have this upper room, a suite we rent out for people to come and spend time in prayer and hang out. And we had our pump go in the river, so we had no water, and we had been melting all this snow in a big giant horse trough.
Super cold there, right?
I mean, that was around Christmas time, and it was so bad. Minus 36 one morning, Celsius. It was bad.
That's almost the same Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah. At least minus 25 Fahrenheit. So, we'd got it working again, but the big horse trough we'd put in front of the house, and it was right in front of the house because we needed to get the snow in buckets into the house to put it by the fireplace to melt it to get water for the animals. So that's why it was there. And this horse trough was 4.5 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, and probably, 3 feet deep. And it's full, and now it's melting, right? And I forgot it was there because we hadn't been using it. So I came down from doing a session. I do spiritual direction and stuff with people. And I had my laptop and my cell phone and my little Bose speaker and my coffee cup. And it was pitch black, and I fell in it head first, catastrophically. I mean,
baptism by accident.
Oh man, my computer went in, my phone went in, my speaker went in, and I went in. I mean, my feet are dangling at one end, and I'm underwater 2 feet. And oh my goodness, so luckily everything was warranted. Like, God, I just had mercy. Thank you, Lord. Like the lady, I went to this store. I don't know if they'd want me to use her name. Big box store. And I told them about my Bose speaker, and I told her what happened. I don't want to know what happened. Just does it work or not? Yes or no? No. Okay, I'll get you a new one. Like, it was so crazy. It was I don't want to know about that. Yeah. and thank the Lord. So anyway, because I got it all fixed and under warranty, we're back on air. So
yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's right.
That was quite something. So now it's only defrosting now, and then next week it's supposed to get bad again. But there's a group coming up on Thursday calling it Mardi Thaw instead of Mardi Gras because this is when you got to clean all the poop. Mardi Thaw. So gonna make it a party. So that's my life on the farm. There's some cool prophetic things happening and stuff, but
mainly you fell into a horse trough and got your electronics fixed. Yes.
If you're going to ask what was a memorable event, that was a memorable event.
I sent you a little video of the when you told me that it happened, of the Nacho Libre baptism scene. I think
yeah, you did send that to me. Absolutely. Yes, I blocked it out, but thank you for bringing it back.
That's the first thing I thought about when you told me you fell into the water. I was concerned about your physical well-being and all that, but once I found out that was okay,
Yeah.
This thought,
Lucky
oh, that
I'm
would
so
be.
short because being at 5'9", I think the thing cut me off at the shins. If I was taller, I might have hit my head on the far end. But
Oh yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah, but so the mercy and grace of God also made you 5'9", knowing
yeah, that's
in
right.
his forethought, knowing that one day you would hit that, fall over, and he saved your life by not making you 5'10".
That's
So
right. Exactly. I should measure it out one day and just see
how
exactly how
much
much
closer
room
it
I
would have
had.
been to, yeah, because if you knocked yourself unconscious and went into the water, that might have been
Oh yeah, I
the
hadn't even
end
thought
of
about that.
the end of Voices from the Desert.
That's
So
right. At the end of the
yes,
podcast, right there.
yeah, but I'm happy that you're still here, Murray.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. I got back from a long trip overseas. I met with a bunch of leaders and did some really cool stuff there. Just like you won't mention the box store, I will not mention the country.
Yes.
But we had some really cool stuff happen, and so if you're tracking with any of our emails or anything like that we do through Wind, you'd probably get some updates about that. So
Wonderful.
so it's been a busy time, which is good, and for all of the above. So anyway, we've been in the last few weeks, the last couple months actually, when it comes to podcast episodes. These are coming out every other week. We've been talking for a while about theosis as an early church concept, looking just giving people context, looking at going all the way back to someone, the statement made by Irenaeus of Lyons, Leon, I think is how you say it actually, in the 2nd century, where he said, God became man that man might become God. And not,
What a statement.
What a statement. And
not in his essence, but in his energies.
Exactly. Become that you would participate in the divine image and you would look like him, essentially. We're looking at things like I think it's in 2 Corinthians where Paul says he became poor that we might become rich.
Yeah.
So he became like us that we might become like him. Or for 2 Peter 1 talking about we became partakers of the divine nature.
Yeah, what a statement.
So there's these early church fathers extrapolated on that, or they didn't really extrapolate on it as try and extrapolate sounds like inventing new ways of thinking about it, but they were trying to understand how do we live that, and that is really the journey of Christian transformation when it comes down to it. Is
and back to like 2 Corinthians, we with unveiled faces, we behold his glory, and we're transformed from glory to glory, this becoming like him, and finding language. What does that mean? Partakers of the divine nature. So
how do we do that? Because they're just in recently meeting with a number of leaders that have been very successful in the work that they're doing, planting churches and seeing God move and seeing the Holy Spirit do great things, and seeing just numbers that fly off the charts in terms of global impact, national impact, this kind of stuff, and realizing that it's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of what you do that you forget about the place of being with the Father. And the emphasis, it's interesting that the emphasis in Paul's ministry is never about how many churches he's planted or how many, quote unquote converts have been. He never gives a number. I don't think I can think of a specific time where Paul says, here's tracking the number of disciples that we've made. But he does talk about his prayers that they would know the Father constantly. I pray and intercede for you constantly. And so he is constantly with the Father, laboring over the people that he loves. And so he emphasizes not so much the work that he does, but the relationship he has with Christ. I love the intros to Paul's letters because he's such a father in how he comes across, right? Especially the personal epistles to Paul and Timothy and Titus, or to Timothy and Titus, from Paul to Timothy and Titus, and just his personal care. So anyway, so the early church fathers were trying to come to grips with what does the journey take, and then we look at the desert fathers, of course, and the kind of schema they put forward of the spiritual life is all about what does it look like to become a partaker of the divine nature. And that doesn't mean, we've talked about this a number of times, that doesn't mean that that you now get to stand in the place of judgment and you have all the power of the divine Godhead. That's not what is implied through this kind of language.
Yeah.
I'm sure we've shared this example before, but I'm just going to mention it briefly, where Macarius the Great, it was said of him that he was known as a god on earth because he covered the faults of others. So
wow, brilliant statement.
This is the essence of theosis and transformation. Is not, when we talk about taking on the nature of God, we're talking about taking on the nature of the divine person who emptied himself, totally humbled himself, and became like us, that we might be walk in union with the Father. And
so, let me throw out a thought that'll just mess with people with that. So Father Mike's going to be on here in a couple of weeks. So he's on.
For context speaking, Father Mike is a Orthodox priest in Abbotsford that Murray is very good friends with.
Yeah,
and he has a podcast called Praying in the Rain. And he works with Ancient Faith Radio, and he has a blog, that kind of stuff. And so Father Mike, I've had the pleasure of being able to sit with him a few times, and Murray's had a long-standing relationship with him. And so we're really happy to welcome Father Mike on here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, he's going to fix all our screw ups and talking about their stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a joke. That's a joke. It may be kind of true, but it is kind of a joke. But how do they think about it? It's just important to throw this out. And this is going to mess with you, but it's good. And I might have said it before, but so I remember saying to Father Mike, because I pick fights with him. I would always play devil's advocate, if we want to say it that way. So I pick these fights, and I would say, Father Mike, why do you guys have Jesus on the cross?
That's very charismatic of you, by the way, to play the devil's advocate.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. Well, somebody's got to do it, I figured, in that relationship. So I'm picking a fight with my good friends.
From the Orthodox guys, I mean, that from their perspective, that's very charismatic.
Oh, is it? Oh, isn't that
being
funny?
The devil's advocate, anyway, some of them.
I get it. Sorry.
Some of the hardline guys who say
that's right. You're praying for the devil. That's right.
Right. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry. I was just being funny. So
I get it now.
Yeah. Good.
So, that is funny though. It's a double entendre. So I would, I'm a Mennonite, man. My Macaron's Mennonite brethren. Well, we won't even have anything. There'll be a wooden cross if that's in a sanctuary. I mean, that's changed a bit, but I said, some of us charismatics, we get pretty excited about this. Our God's not dead. He's alive. We get, and I said, and he asked me this question. So do you believe that Jesus is the exact representation of the Father? I go, yes. I mean, he's got me already, right? Because we know that's biblical. So because when Philip said to Jesus, show us the Father, then we'll believe. And then Jesus says, well, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father, right? You believe that? Yes. So I said, well, he says, well, then when you look at Jesus, you're looking at perfect theology on the cross. Not just what he did, but how it looked. I'm like, what do you mean by that? He goes, when you look Jesus on the cross, you're looking at the nature of God. And I'm still not getting it. Well, what do you mean by that? He goes, humble, merciful, broken, patient, caring, forgiving, meek. Jesus on the cross represents the nature of the Father. I'm like, oh, I mean, he's also on a throne in power. And so is Jesus today, but he also took on our nature, right? The Son of Man is Jesus's favorite way to describe himself, right?
Yeah.
And I just that's the nature of God. And that's how we can become like him. And that's the reason for the Beatitudes that are going to come up, right? How do we become like him? By becoming like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And you mentioned we're not like him in essence. We're like him in energy, because those are loaded theological terms.
Yeah, we'll have to bug Father Mike with that one.
Well, yeah, but I'll say it simply this way, and there's something we'll have to extrapolate on a later episode, which I think we keep saying on each episode. So we've got.
I know we do that every time.
We've got like 100 topics planned that we don't even know about.
I know. Well, at least it lets people know we're going to keep going.
The energies of God are how he interacts with creation. And the essence of God is the unknowable nature of who he is. And so the energies are the providential display of his love towards humanity.
Oh, there you go.
Right.
I know the word grace is the word energia. It's where we get the word energy from.
Yes. So it would be it would be the divine humility, the divine emptying, divine love, all the kind of things that we see. Those would be the energies of God. And so we become like him in energy because we become like what he does. And we become like what he does by looking at him. Actually, Murray and I were just talking about this before we went live and started recording.
We should have filmed that.
Yeah, we should have talked about that. But is how this is another thing that we've talked about a number of times, that the typical model for transformation in an evangelical context is Bible, church attendance, Bible reading, and stacking chairs. And those are like, if you do those things, you'll be saved. And it's.
I got a degree in the third one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's how you get noticed, right? You stack chairs.
Yeah.
And so these aren't the things that lead to transformation. And so our question is, in the context of the conversation, or in the context of the topic that we've been talking about, this deeper journey of theosis and transformation and coming to grips with the deeper things of the heart, and looking especially at the Desert Fathers, the mystics, the early church fathers, the contemplative literature, what's kind of the way, practically speaking, they talked about the journey of transformation. And so I'll couch it this way, and I'll toss it over to Murray, because I was just reading the other day. I've been kind of prayerfully reading through the Gospels for the last couple of years now, and now I'm kind of back in Matthew, reading through the Sermon on the Mount, figuring that if you pray through the words of Jesus, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, I can't lose there.
You can't lose there. And I read the other day Matthew 6:6, where Jesus says, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. And so, I mean, simple statement, right? When you pray, go into the secret place, shut your door, go into your room, ostensibly the secret place. The early church fathers would call that secret place the secret place of the heart. And so you go into the secret place of the heart, shut your door, talk to the Father, and he who sees you in secret rewards you openly. So here's the thing, though. The prayer is the thing that is most germane to all of humanity. It's also the thing, and this is taking right from one of our favorites. Now I can't think of his name. We've referenced him a couple of times. The saint guy who was transformed, the divine light. I see you all.
Yeah, Saint Simeon, the new theologian.
No, not Saint Simeon. Later.
Saint Seraphim of Sarah.
Saint Seraphim, yeah, Saint Seraphim. He talks about how prayer is the only thing that you can ever say is available to everyone at all times, regardless of status, position, or anything.
Yes, that's right.
Right. And so prayer is germane to all of humanity, but it's also the most difficult thing for all of humanity. And so as common as it is, it's also like one of the Desert Fathers who says prayer is warfare until the last breath. And which is absolutely very true. So Jesus said, go into the secret place and pray. And so the very first thing that you think about when you read that is, how do I do that? And the very first thing that happens to people when they do that is they realize that they're going to fail miserably.
Yes. Hallelujah.
So I was telling Murray this when we were kind of talking about the topic of the day, that when I first had a mind to pray, and the first thing I had done, I'm going back probably about 15, 20 years now. I had gained an interest in Jesus, had some significant moments in my life where I had met him. My life is starting to be transformed a bit. And I read through my Bible. I said, I need to read my Bible. I went to church my whole life, but I never read the Bible. So I read the whole Bible. And when I finished the Bible, I thought, well, I conquered the Bible, so now I need to conquer prayer. And so I sat down to pray, and I lasted about 30 seconds, and I just picked the Bible up and started reading again, because I just had no clue what to do. And all that happened when I sat there was my bum went numb, and I got really uncomfortable. And it was,
and then the mind was wandering all over the place.
Mind wanders all over the place, right? So I attempted to enter the secret place, but I had no clue how to pierce that, no clue how to get there, right? And so then through the course of, you go back to our episode 2 where I talked about my journey. Murray talked about his journey in episode 1. I talked about encountering God. And then it wasn't until this significant encounter I had that prayer, oh, it all of a sudden made sense. It's about directing my affection towards him. So I remember getting home and thinking, okay, I'm going to sit down and pray. And so what I did was, okay, Jesus said, go into your room or go into your closet and shut the door. So I looked around my room and I thought, oh, I've got a closet. So I literally walked over to my closet, sat down in the closet and shut the door, because I thought, well, he said go into the closet, so that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like, this will be a place where I can leave distractions and all this kind of stuff, right? And I sat there for about 30 seconds and I was going, what is that distracting hum that I'm hearing? Is there a charger? You know, sometimes when the charger is overcharged or whatever, right, you can hear this buzzing or this hum, right?
Ringing.
Looking around, this ringing, this hum. What is that? Like, well, is there an electronic thing in here? Is there a power outlet in here? What is going on? Looking around, all of a sudden it dawns on me that it's ringing in my ears. That I've never actually been quiet enough. And at this point, I'm probably 26, 25, wow. 26. I'd never been quiet enough to realize that my ears had a ringing in them. I'd never heard it before. But when I sat
That's so amazing.
In my closet and shut the door to enter into my secret place, the very first thing that happened was I heard ringing in my ears and spent the next 5 minutes trying to figure out what it was, right? So absolute failure of entering into the secret place. Jesus did not mean go into an actual closet. But, you know, so I did that for like 2 days and then was like, I'm going to find a place that's more comfortable than my closet.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of better seating arrangement.
Yeah, it's a better seating arrangement. And, you know, maybe put some worship music, some music on so that I don't hear the ringing as much. And anyway, you know, they could talk all about that. But so this
we should probably throw out, because a lot of people won't know this, because of course you have to have some contemplative background of what did Jesus mean then by go into your closet and pray.
What does he mean? What does he mean by go into your secret place? What does he mean by the secret place?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, is that, you know, so I think some people kind of in our charismatic lingo, sometimes the secret place is like the place you go to become hyper emotionally moved by God, you know, or something like that, right? Or, well, that's only the secret place, really only the place that hardcore intercessory prayer people go into, right? Yes. It's like the secret room in the church that they all go pray in or something like that, right? Like, we've got all kinds of things that we might think about that, but the secret place, as the early church fathers understood it, was the secret place of the heart. I was just looking at some of the commentaries they make about it. It's the secret place of the heart. Now, how do we get there? That's the trick, because Jesus said that's where we're to go to know the Father, to be seen by the Father, right? In the secret place, your Father who's in the secret place, he sees you. And that's the whole point, is to be seen in the secret place. But how do I get there? Because the hardest thing, like anybody knows this, as soon as you sit down, every distracting thought comes your way. As soon as you and then your mind flitters and wanders away, and it's very difficult to bring it right back. One of the first movement of prayer, Augustine the Great, he called the first movement of prayer was recollection. And it was recalling the senses back to yourself, where they'd been divested into all kinds of different things, or interested in all kinds of different things, bringing them back to the self. So this is the conversation today is, what's the secret place? How do we get there?
How do we do it? Yeah.
How do we do it? And what are practical steps? Because it's like, you know, with something that's so complicated, or not, I shouldn't say complicated, something that's so difficult, oftentimes we think the answer should be complicated because the situation is difficult. But the answer is not that complicated, but it kind of is. So
even that answer is kind of complicated.
Even that answer is kind of complicated. So Murray, give us some thoughts.
Okay. Well, you know, just in regard to the deep things of the heart, everyone, just keep in mind maybe Ephesians 3 here, when the people are freaking out, Paul's in prison, right? And Paul says, you know, be strengthened in the inner man, so Christ may dwell in your heart by faith. So may there, we're not talking salvation, faith here. We're talking in the moment experiencing Christ in the heart, right? So, and it's conditional. Be strengthened so that he may, so that you may know how high and wide and long and deep is the love of God that surpasses gnosis, head knowledge. I think the word there is dianoia, even there, didactic reason, right? So something's going on inside of your heart, the secret place. There's strengthening happening that surpasses head knowledge, which would be like, I better just go read something because so and then it says this, so that you may be filled to all the fullness of God. So the filling to the fullness of God comes with this enlargement of the heart. If you want to use that term, the heart enlarges through knowing the love of God. The heart enlarges through thanksgiving. And this is Christ's home, for he sent the spirit of his son into our head. No, it doesn't say that. It said he sent the spirit of his son into our heart, who cries out, Abba, Father. Right. And so we're not talking, that word there is not emotion. The heart there is actually a place of our being. And so I'm going to read you, just because we're kind of nailing it now on that part, because I don't think I've read this before here anyway. So I'm going to read you a quote. It's out of the Philokalia, which is the love of the beautiful. It's the writings of the Desert Fathers. From about, I don't know, 350 to, 1450, probably, maybe even later than that. But I'm just going to read you this definition of this heart. And so when you read Romans 12, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that word there is nous. And this is that word we're going to read, which most of the time is translated, or as the Desert Fathers would say, the Eastern Church would translate this word intellect, not as your brain, but as this inner man heart thing, Paul. So this is your closet right here. This is your closet.
That's just a side note. That's important to emphasize, because in English it can be something that we just gloss right over.
Absolutely.
We use the word mind, and we mean we might say mind your own business, right? And we may say something is preoccupying my mind, meaning my thoughts, right? Minding your own business, pay attention to yourself. So we use the term mind in multiple different contexts, and we can tell what the word means based on the context in which it's used, just like we use the word love in multiple different contexts.
Absolutely.
Right? I got a new
I love
phone.
my tractor, let me tell you.
Yeah, you love your tractor. I love my new phone. I love the color of it.
That's right.
Happy. And then when I say to my wife, I love you, it's a very different thing I'm talking about, right?
Let's hope so.
Yeah, let's hope so. That's right. That's right. Although I don't know if I love her enough to give her the phone, and she's been saying she wants.
Yeah, there you go.
So anyway, but my point is, when we're seeing all these words, and we're seeing words, the word for mind, there is like Colossians 2 that says, let this mind be in you. Or no, that's Philippians 2, let this mind be in you. Or Colossians 2 that talks about set your mind on things above. And
there we go.
Romans 12 that talks about being renewed in your mind. These are different words for mind. They're not the same. Actually, in Colossians 2, the Old King James translates it as set your affections on things above. So even from the King James to the New King James, they changed how they translated that word. So it's important to understand the context in which it was said and the original word that was used. So because the word means something different culturally in the New Testament, that when you see, phroneo, mind, Colossians 2, nous, mind, Romans 12, we just read the English word mind and assume it means how you think, but the words have very different contexts and very different meanings, and so we have to look at that. So that's what Murray's talking about.
Yes, and now I have. It's over there. Okay, I put the page down. Get out of the sun here. I was being blinded. So we think blessed are the pure in heart here. When we think be transformed by the renewing of your mind, which again, they're throwing around concepts. So this is again out of the Philokalia, the writings of the Desert Fathers, and here's the definition of this word. So think inner closet heart again. This part of our being. Nous, be transformed by the highest faculty in man, through which, provided it is purified, he knows God, or the inner apprehension of spiritual perception. Unlike the dianoia, so think, diagnostic reasoning, kind of the same word. The intellect does not function by formulating abstract concepts and then arguing on this basis to a conclusion reached through deductive reasoning, but it understands divine truth by means of immediate experience, intuition, or simple cognition. The intellect dwells in the depths of the soul. It constitutes the innermost aspect of the heart. The intellect, the nous, is the organ of contemplation, the eye of the heart. And that would be their definition of that word. So again, if we look at Ephesians 3 there, what Paul's talking about, or let the peace of God guard your heart in Colossians, or when we're thinking about being filled with the Spirit, as we looked in Ephesians a minute ago, to know how high and wide and long and deep is the love of God that surpasses your brain, the dianoia, so that you may be filled to all the fullness of God. This activation of that, and it's an interesting thing then talking about that and getting into that place, and the reason that's important is for the Eastern Church. And again, if any of them are listening right now, they may consider me a heretic using their own language, or just so you know. And that's why Father Mike's going to come and clean.
That's okay.
Clean
There's people in the evangelical church that consider you a heretic too. So
I know, being a charismatodox, when everyone considers you a heretic. Yes. So
it's almost a mark of pride to be considered a heretic nowadays.
Yeah. So I
distracted Murray. So
no, it's funny. It just made me laugh about nowadays. It's a mark of pride. It's the same thing being an apostle. I remember Rick Joyner saying, "You can't throw a rock into a crowd anymore, not hit an apostle." so maybe it's true with being a heretic as well, right? Yes. Everybody thinks. So Hart, let's just think about this. So I'm going to read you a passage. And there's other verses we could talk about, but I just wanted to couch that in some biblical theology and some different ways of looking at it. And the reason this is important is the transformation of the person, this theosis, is becoming like God, this looking at him with unveiled face. What's happening here? And I know in one of the big technical schools in British Columbia, they did one of the Christian organizations did a big campaign in there, and they did the 4 spiritual laws and handed them out. And supposedly they had a 90%, just hundreds, thousands, 1,000 people said, yes, we accept this, right? They went back a year later and found that 90% of them said it doesn't work. And what happened? They made a mental consent to, yes, Jesus is the truth. He's the way. I confess my sins. Then why didn't it work? Well, because just mental consent isn't good enough. There has to be this internal change of the heart. This inner man has to engage and become changed. And the reason I say that is that sometimes we think, well, I pray the 4 spiritual laws. Well, now I'm saved. I'm in. And I think that's true. But remember what Paul says, work out your salvation in fear and trembling. So let's say you met an Orthodox guy, a priest on a train. And I remember Kallistos Ware said this. He was on the train going somewhere, and there was a, kind of a fiery street preacher, and he got on the train with him, and he looked at him and said, "Are you saved, brother?" And Kallistos Ware had to think about that for a minute. And he goes, "Well, I'm in the process of being saved." It's this journey of we with unveiled faces, but the heart, this inner closet, is what's being changed, and the Beatitudes really nail that. So I'm going to read you a clip out of this book. It's called what is it called? I have to take a look at that for a second here before I come back to my page. Discovering the Deep Heart by Elder Zachariah. Remember Thy First Love by Zachariah the Archimandrite. There you go.
And he's teaching. He is extrapolating or commenting on the teachings of Elder Silouan and Sophrony.
Yep,
Silouan
that's right.
the Athonite and Sophrony of Essex, who were both Eastern Orthodox monks in the late 1800s, early 1800s. Yeah. So that's the context for what he's saying.
I just want you to catch their view, and thanks, Josh, for that, because for people who are like, well, where are you getting this from? That needed to sew that up. So I'm just so busy trying to find it without my glasses on. I'm like, what am I seeing here? So remember, we're talking about monks though again, right? But we can apply this. What are they talking about here about this heart and the inner closet and becoming like Christ? What's going on here? So remember, talking about monks.
Because prayer
Let's
is
see.
available to everyone, so teachings on prayer should be broadly applicable to anybody. So
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
When a person is granted the grace of leaving this world, his heart is alive. So let's apply that here. When you first get saved and the Spirit fills you, you have these 6 months of glory, right? And we see other people experience this too. 6 months of glory, right? Or we have some major encounter with God. The heart is alive. He feels God and hears his voice. He senses his presence in the power of his name. He finds strength to take a superhuman leap of faith in defiance of man's fallen nature. But unfortunately, it's all too easy to become accustomed to a certain way of life, especially when we begin to take for granted the grace which God, energia, which God gives us at the beginning and the state of heart that this inspires. And we do that too. We get back and just going through the motions, right? Our high is over. We're going through the motions. We're just going through church every day. In our culture, to keep that high up, here's the difference. To keep up that high, we go to conference to conference, next speaker, who's latest on the circuit, right?
Or latest worship album, maybe
Yep.
that, latest, whatever it happens to be, or next great. Today, we may not go to conference, but you go from podcast to podcast.
To podcast. That's right.
Like
What's the next thing that's going to give you a buzz?
Exactly.
And see, that's what we want to pick on right there. The difference between, and that's not a bad thing to do. If it keeps your heart hot for Christ, that's awesome. But if you're just doing it for an emotional high because you want to keep the emotions up,
or to be mentally stimulated too.
Yep. Or to be mentally stimulated, or to catch up on what's the new thing going on.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but what they're saying here is that, when we get to these places of feeling dry, it's actually telling us something about our inner man, about our heart. And that needs to be pastored. So I'll just keep reading, but that's why it's important. How do you do that without having to go from podcast to podcast and meeting to meeting please come back to our podcast.
Yeah.
Please don't abandon our podcast.
Come back to the podcast because we'll help you. But
yeah,
the just a comment on that is one of the priests, the monks that I've been able to talk with, he essentially says, when you go through periods of dryness, the dryness itself is the prayer, and it's not that you have to answer the dryness by finding something to fill it. It's the dryness itself becomes prayer, and God, I am dry, right? Not how do I find this to fill that? How do I find this to fill that?
Do you want to expand on that some more? Because that's brilliant.
Well, the thing is, you go through, and this, again, another topic for another day.
Yeah,
where we can talk about the dark night seasons that we go, looking at John of the Cross and Dark Nights of the Soul. That there are seasons in your life where God systematically decides He's going to destroy the things that bring you comfort. And so, because we go through this, we entered into this dry season. Actually, one author, his name is Michael Molinos, who came just after John of the Cross. He was called a heretic by the Jesuits, and so I like him a lot. But anyway, Molinos said he called the Dark Night of the Soul the veil of dryness, because God hides by dryness what He's doing in the deep place of the heart.
Yeah, the roots got to go deeper in dryness.
Got to go deeper. And so what happens when we live, I think it is a human thing. It happens to be, we can acutely see it in our modern day culture because we're so used to getting our answer immediately. Like I placed an Amazon order the other day because I had some birthday money on Amazon that my father had given me. Yeah, I'm waiting for one of the packages to ship, and it's been like 2 days, and I'm going, hasn't it shipped yet? Like because we're so used to seeing within 24 hours we get a shipping notice, right?
Yeah,
because that's the culture that we live in, and so that doesn't mean that, well, the kind of the immediacy of every answer at our fingertips in our present day culture created a different problem for humanity than they had 2,000 years ago. No, it's the same problem, because we still are desperate to placate that deep hunger and desire, and we've just found our ways of filling that void And so we go through these periods where, oh, it's so dry and nothing seems to be working, but that's designed by God, because the dryness itself becomes the prayer, because now in my dryness I offer myself to God, and I don't look for something else that tries to placate the comfort I need, because again, the Holy Spirit is called the great comforter. He longs to bring you comfort. And so but the thing is, as soon as we're touched by dryness, the natural human tendency is to find the thing that would quench that thirst.
Yeah.
And so what do? We look for the next thing that will quench the thirst. And in ancient times, that might have been going to a temple prostitute. That might have been going to the public square where there would have been plays and the sophistic teachers, right? The philosophers of the day. You would sit and listen. You would find other things to distract you. You had major parties, right, in terms of the lifestyle in Greece.
And gladiator combats and things like
combats, that. All kinds of things.
Chariot races.
So today we have online shopping. Today we have, obviously pornography on the internet. Today we have, like you're saying, going to that conference or this conference, right? We still find everything because my life is dry, and so now I'm trying to find something to fill that. And but the dryness itself, if the dryness itself never becomes the prayer, then we never discover God deep in the heart, because
Amen.
That's what he desires, is his presence deep in the heart. You never go ahead. Sorry, Murray.
No, I was going to say, one of the things that I find helpful to tell people, because in the heart, and a lot of us, I mean, we feel pain in the heart if people aren't loving on us, if we run out of money, if you know what I mean, pain in the heart. And if you think of everybody like this, and you can try this, it's something the Lord taught me. Present your body as a living sacrifice, right? Be no longer conformed to the pattern of this world, but present your body as a living sacrifice, and be transformed by the renewing of your mind. There's that word, right? Nous, inner person. So think about this. Think about an altar in which you're going to present your body as a living sacrifice. Think about that. Just think about that thought. Now think about the concept of heart there, nous, inner man. And look at that place where you have that pain. You feel abandoned, you feel lost, you feel afraid, right? Think about that place, right? And feel that. Allow yourself to feel that in the presence of God. Let it live. Let it be completely alive. Don't medicate it. Don't turn it off. Don't ignore it. Keep it totally alive right there. Okay? And now present that place right there as a living sacrifice. Jesus, right here, I put this on the altar right in my heart. And I ask your living fire to come down on this place of me that's hurting. Right here. And as you do that, as you practice that, you will realize that in your heart, in the pain, there is this, it's hard to describe it, a burning comfort. And it is a sacrifice because you're surrendering your pain to him. You're surrendering the right to have it. You're asking the Lord to transform it. And you kind of have to just like, okay, whatever you want to do here, Lord, I'm completely open. But you'll notice inside your heart, a fire begin to burn. But again, it's learning to pay attention to an inner world instead of medicating it with an outer world, right? And anyway, I just wanted to throw that out. And if that works for you, great. If not, there'll be many other things that will work for you because we're all made a little bit different. So it's good to keep that in mind, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, let's go back to the text because why not? Because I'm getting to the best part.
Good. Let's go.
This is why it's a podcast, so we can stop and talk about all these things. Because, wow, one of the things that Desert Fathers would say, that when you go to church and you're praying and something strikes you in that sermon, you stop listening to it and you listen to what's happening inside your heart and you pay attention to what struck you and you stay there before God in thankfulness and you receive it. And believe it or not, that's one reason if you go to let's say an Orthodox church, they don't have a lot of loud music going on, a lot of flash and a lot of bling. There is stuff, but everything has made you to pay attention to the awe that's happening inside of you, the feeling of holiness, the feeling of humility, to grow your heart and to pay attention to these things, because you never quench the inner with the outer, right? So, I mean, some of the things that Josh just said there a minute ago about the desert becomes, the dryness becomes prayer. I mean, to stop right there and just go, okay, that's enough. Thank you. Pausing, right? Because that did something to the heart, didn't it? Didn't we have an experience right there of the deep heart, which we're talking about, emerge right there? Something in my being leapt at that. And I mean, me literally, I was like, please explain that. Because the Spirit moved in my heart. I felt it like, oh my, I need to know more. And it made me hungry for Jesus. So something inside of me leapt, and I was aware of it, right? That's the deep heart emerging. That's this inner man and learning to live out of this place. So, we caught it right there. And hopefully my little example helped too. But again, they would say you never cheat the inward with the outer. Why? Because Jesus Christ lives in your heart by faith, and to be aware of the growth of that. It's brilliant. Okay. Anyway, but that's why I said that. But unfortunately, as you know, Elder Zechariah here is saying, we then turn to rules and regulations to make up for our loss, and it is only a matter of time before we become self-satisfied in our observance of them, perhaps even believing that our salvation is thereby guaranteed. I go to church, I go to conferences, I wear the right clothes, and since we no longer possess the treasure of divine consolation, this heart full of love and humility, we easily slip even further down a way of life that is unworthy of our calling. And this can go on for years, and we find ourselves in a state of lethargy and negligence, right? So here's a good part. Unless we endeavor to live within our heart, which we just talked about, we remain blind to untamed passions like lethargy or lust or anxiety or fear, anger. The inclinations of our heart and mind remain beyond our control. We sin whether we want to or not. So I'm in traffic, somebody cuts me off, and I'm like, oh, where's that freaking son of, it comes up out of the heart. Sin can never attract the blessing of God. So unless we keep our hearts alive and alert, we will eventually become strangers to him. The scripture says that the heart is deep. God honors this deep heart of man. All heaven hearkens to a deep heart, a thirst for God and ready to receive him. But if the heart is indifferent to God, we are worth little more than dust and ashes. We must attend to our heart and cultivate it. For the hidden man of the heart is very precious in the sight of God. May God give us such a heart, a deep heart that is capable of a divine and spiritual sensation, which again goes back to their definition of nous there, right? That's what they're talking about. And we learn to enter our deep heart through personal prayer in our rooms and attendance at church services. We take courage to enter in. We shall behold the great miracle of the union of our life with God's life, for this takes place in the heart of man. Theosis. We're back there again. But how do you get a hold of it? So I'm going to go back to, because you have some really good things to say here on the Beatitudes. So I'm going to go back to an example of that. So you got to keep an idea, everybody, that in our Western culture, we tend to think that external things provoke us. That guy cut me off in traffic. Why the dirt? It's external things, right? The pastor hasn't talked to me in weeks. Why that? And it's like, this is being done to me. But scripture doesn't look at it that way. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew, I think it's 15, when the disciples are eating heads of grain, the Pharisees are freaking out. He says to them, it's not the outward things that defile a man, it's the things that come out of the heart, right? So we're back to that. Gossip and lust and murder and slander. So from scripture's point of view, when things provoke us, what's in the heart comes up and gets exposed, right? And then we get a good look at it. And it's important to realize the functioning of the inner man. This heart, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So I would do this thing with my class, and we'll kick the ball back to about the Beatitudes. We'll kick that back to Josh in a second here. But okay, think about the Beatitudes as heart activation. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Aren't those all heart things? That's causing the deep heart to emerge, if we want to look at it that way. So if we did these things, the deep heart, humility, grace, mercy, kindness, patience would emerge. They would come forth. Learning to take the low seat at the table, turning the other cheek. Aren't those all heart things? So I would say to my class, I would say this. Guys, I want to show you heart activation, just to think of it like this. So blessed are the pure in heart. No, what did I say? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And a little bit of background. Blessed are the poor in spirit. A.W. Tozer, a great evangelical theologian, would say Abraham was the most poor in spirit person ever. And we would go, what? How? The guy owned everything. He was rich. He goes, poor in spirit is not about what you own. It's about what owns you. And the only thing he wanted was a son. That's it. That was his thing. And the very thing he wanted, God asked him to lay down. You know the story, right? And supposing God would give it back. And keep in mind, he had some heart issues. That guy was afraid all the time. Gave his wife to Pharaoh. God gives him another promise. Then has Ishmael because he goes, well, if it ain't working out, then God gives him another promise. And then he gives his wife to Abimelech. I mean, he's always trying to save his own skin all the time. That's a fear issue. They're going to kill me if they find out. And then they're going to, I mean, he's got a heart issue.
Our godly heroes in the Bible, right?
I love that he's the man of faith, right? He's the father of faith because man, but he's the father of faith because he walked out his heart issue. Because right in the end, because he's scared of everybody's going to take everything from him, right? They're going to take my wife, they're going to take, and now he's like, well, God's going to take my son, it'll be okay. Because by now he knows God. His heart is transformed. And then God says, don't kill him. Now I know. Now I know what's in your heart, and the promises will come. So blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the poor in spirit. It's not about what you own, it's what one owns you. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So when Bible talks about heaven, it's always what's going on up there. But when it talks about kingdom of heaven, it's always about what's happening on the earth. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field, right? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So what's going on inside of you, that's a big deal, right? So I would say to my class, okay, guys, let's find out what's in our heart. Let's see what controls us. Let's try this. I want you to drive to and I said, just think about trying it. So you guys out there too, you can do this if you want, or you can just think about doing it and watch what your heart does. What happens in your inner man when you hear me say this, okay? I want you to drive to the middle of nowhere.
Picture it. You're saying, imagine.
Yeah. So picture actually doing it, or think about doing it. Because I make it a little bit more than just like reading it in a book and you're observing it. Think about you doing this, right? And you don't need to do it, but think about it. Okay. Just like, okay, I'll commit myself that far. I may ponder actually doing this, but you don't know what you're getting into.
But maybe do it also.
Yeah, but maybe do it also. See what happens. Yeah. Drive to the middle of nowhere. So no traffic, or very little, but possibly somebody might come by. Park your car. Go to the middle of the road and kneel down, or even go face down. Okay, when you hear that, what does your heart do? Probably like every other human being, it goes, oh my God. Where is that coming from? Now, did I cause that? Or did something in you get stirred up because I said it? Right? Now, sometimes the reason we go through things is because there's things in there that need to come up to get healed. Right? We need to look at the deep things of the heart. But see, the thing is, the desert fathers would say, working out your salvation. You can work on this. And the three ways the church would usually do this would be almsgiving, giving to the poor, prayer, and fasting. Right? Work on your humility. Work on your love of the lost. Make your heart, well, Paul would say, always pray how? With thanksgiving. Warm your heart up. Take care of your heart. Let the peace of God, what's it doing? Guard your heart. This inner part of us needs to be pastored by us. And that's why it's an important thought, because often in our charismatic culture is we're not doing anything with our inner man. We want the anointing. We want people to pray for us. I want more knowledge. I want to understand. But what are we doing to our heart and the inner man? How are we growing that? How is the deep heart emerging in humility and love and mercy and right? That this formation to become like God, which is theosis. How are we walking that through? And this is what, if you are a monk or a nun living in a monastery, this is what you're doing, right? For your lifetime. And just to think, this is a big part of how Christians always viewed Christianity. And in our culture, we barely think of it, I think. So anyway, there's my rant and rumble right to the end there. So back to the Beatitudes. You want to...
Yeah, well,
even neuron mirroring, I think would fit right here really well too, because we talked about that earlier.
We did, and we may, there's so many different things we could talk about. Again, it's like all these things come up,
I
And
know.
and here, let's say this: anybody that's listening, there's a lot of things that Murray just talked about. If there's something that really keys off that you go, I want to know more about this, you can always send us a message on Facebook. Look up Murray or I, or Instagram, right? Murray Dewick or Josh Hoffer. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, the social media stuff. You can send us a message saying, "Hey, can you talk about this topic?" So that's always a thing you can do.
Yeah.
I love what you were saying about you're driving into the middle of nowhere, laying down on the road and paying attention to, because all of a sudden, even picturing yourself doing it, you can feel the anxiety rise, right?
Absolutely. Right.
And the thing is, you're not like, you don't consciously tell yourself anxiety rise now, right?
Yes.
Nobody plans to be anxious, and people don't plan to get angry. These are unconscious forces that ply themselves upon us. And the Desert Fathers would have called these passions or even demons.
Yeah.
And
it might be good to define that word passion so everybody kind of gets it, because we've probably bumped it a couple times, and I broke it down a little bit, but we go by it so fast, maybe.
Yeah, well, the one definition in short of passions would be, passions are your inner wounds and the things that limit your ability to see God. And
and that's important, everybody, right there.
Yeah, very important, because where anger may be pointed at blinding yourself to the goodness of God, because I'm angry at the people around me. But anger can also be pointed towards anger at unrighteousness, or anger at the own unrighteousness and sin in my own heart. And I remember having a dream one time years ago where a spiritual father of mine came to me in the dream and said, "Josh, you need to get angry at the things that would hold you back."
Oh.
And so anger in its proper context can be used as a formative tool. Like Jesus said, be angry, or Paul said, be angry, do not sin. I think that was Paul. Be angry and do not sin. And so anger as a uncontrolled passion usually denigrates the people around you and hurts the people around you and ultimately destroys your own humanity. But anger as a formative tool runs from sin. So the same thing with lust. I remember one author, I can't think of his name right now, said, "Lust is desire gone mad." So lust is the passion, but desire is the purified intent of the heart to desire God.
Amen. That's great.
And so we have an inner wound that we need to find something that brings that that can sate the pain, right? Something that can alleviate the pain. And so when the inner wound is there, lust can bring an alleviation to the pain momentarily because it can distract me, but it never quite heals it and actually adds to it. It's like it rips the pain, rips the wound open even more in the long term. And so I love the concept of passions being inner wounds. And as we see the goodness of God, as we reorient our gaze to the Father, as we find,
and they can be transformed into the holy things they're supposed to be, divine love from lust.
Yeah, and this is we're looking at some of the Desert Fathers talked about this. Basil the Great talked about this, that the things that we would call passions can also be purified in that sense. And you think, like, I've been thinking about looking at the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, and it's interesting that if you look at the Beatitudes almost lead you by degrees to a place of spiritual maturity.
Yes.
And
shocking.
It is shocking when you think about it. There's actually a process to them. And the Beatitudes they're fascinating, actually. Those are the ones in Matthew 5 that we classically call the Beatitudes, right? The first one is blessed are the poor in spirit. And so for there's the kingdom of heaven. So as Murray had said, what owns me? Not letting anything own me, but understanding if I see myself as poor, and especially, like, it doesn't say blessed are the poor in material possessions, but blessed are the poor in spirit. If I see myself as not having, because if I'm poor, I don't have the resources it takes. I need something outside of myself. I don't have it. And so I'm recognizing the neediness of my own life, how much I need in order to survive. So for me to obtain the kingdom of heaven, I have to recognize my great lack. But most of us, that's the very first thing that we don't want to recognize is our great lack, because we spend so much time accumulating stuff to convince ourselves that we don't have a lack. So the first step of the Beatitudes is blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who come to grips with their weakness and their lack and recognize their need. Well, then what happens? Well, then they mourn because they recognize what they don't have. So blessed are those who mourn. Great. And they'll be comforted. So I recognize my lack, what I don't have. And so I mourn and grieve the very thing I don't have that I need, which is the kingdom of heaven, the presence of Jesus, the sustaining power of his presence, his spirit, and his grace. So now I go from being poor in spirit to mourning because I recognize what I don't have and I grieve the thing that I've lost. And so then I blessed are the meek, because in grieving the thing that I've lost, when I begin to obtain that comfort, it generates humility in me because I recognize I don't have everything that I need. I need something else. So blessed are the meek. Now that I've found this place of humility, I start to obtain, it says, you'll inherit the earth. So I start to obtain the things that God would have for me. Well, then from that place of meekness, all of a sudden, my hunger increases. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So this leads you by degrees, right? So now I'm recognizing my lack. I'm grieving what I've lost. I'm recognizing my status, my place, the humility. I'm starting to obtain the thing that I want now. So I inherit the earth, right? I'm meek and I inherit the earth. So now I hunger and thirst because I have a new appetite. So I hunger and thirst for righteousness and I'll be filled. Now, when I hunger and thirst for righteousness, I start to obtain mercy because I start to see God as he is, and I start to see how merciful he is. Blessed are those who are merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. As I see the goodness and the tenderness of God, I start to find purity of heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So I'm starting in a place of seeing my lack, recognizing what I need, finding that place of humility, finding a different appetite, hunger and thirst for righteousness, knowing the mercy of God, the tenderness of God. I start to gain a vision of his heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers. So now that I find purity of heart, I start thinking about myself less and thinking about others more. I'm now making peace everywhere I go. So now we're starting to see the mature expression of Christian faith. Blessed are the peacemakers. So my life is no longer about me. My life is about the people outside of me. And as a peacemaker, I start to be known. They shall be called. It's the first one that's outward focused. They shall be known. Isn't that awesome? Right? They shall be known, but only when they're peacemakers, because they've encountered humility, learned a new hunger and appetite, and obtained the mercy of God and began to see him as he truly is. And so now we see the ultimate degree of Christian maturity. Blessed are those who are persecuted. So it doesn't start with persecution. It starts with seeing your need for God, and it ends in when you're persecuted for my sake, you obtain something great. But the reward is the same thing you saw that you needed in the first place. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So there's a progression through the Beatitudes that leads you to a place of maturity. And then Jesus, he goes on to talk about you go, blessed are you're the salt of the earth. If you lose your saltiness, I actually, total side comment to the evangelical church today. I was thinking about this recently. Blessed or you're the salt of the earth. If you lose your saltiness, what good are you? You'll be thrown out and trampled under the feet of men, right? Jesus says that. And I thought, well, that's like the evangelical church has kind of lost their saltiness. And so you get chucked out into the world to get trampled under the feet of men. Well, what happens? You start to gain humility again. And so you start to reacquire your saltiness, but there's a process, right? Yes. And I was thinking about that's a good word for the evangelical church, that we've lost our saltiness, because salt would be the preserving factor against anyway. I've got a whole bunch of notes and I could think through this whole thing, but I've been thinking about the evangelical church losing its saltiness and being trampled under the feet of men, and how that's where we are right now. Total side note. So that's prophetic, guys. That's right. So then I was thinking about this in context of the whole Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, again, because this has been my prayer and meditation for the last couple months, is when Jesus talks about anger, right, and dealing with anger. And because we've kept, he says, you've heard that you shall not murder, but I'm telling you that this is an issue of the heart. This isn't just an outward expression.
Yeah.
Because now he's talking, I love the Sermon on the Mount because it starts with leading you through degrees to what it looks like to find a place of Christian maturity where you begin to look like God. Blessed are those, this is the ultimate thing, right? He's persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. You begin to really look like him when you see him as he truly is. So then he talks about what it looks like to reorient your gaze to the Father. When you reorient your gaze to the Father, you recognize I'm the salt of the earth. I need to be about preserving other people. You recognize I'm the light of the world, that what I do, people will see. And so who I am is important, and how I compose myself is important. And then he talks about when someone's reoriented their gaze to the Father, when anger comes, this is how they'll deal with anger. And I love, he gives 3 responses to anger, right? 3 outworkings of anger. The first one, if you call your brother fool, if you call your brother raka, which is an insult, and then or you say you're angry with your brother without cause, then you call him raka, and then you call him fool, and each one is a more significant punishment, right?
Wow.
And so now he's going again. He's leading you through degrees by catch it quick, because when you're looking at the Father, because the whole context for Matthew 5 ends with, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Be complete and mature is what that term perfect means. So when you're looking at your Father, this is what a kind of person that looks at their Father looks like. You say in your heart anger, okay, catch it there. If you don't catch it there, you say raka, and now the damage is even worse. If you don't catch it there, then you say you fool in front of everybody, and the damage is even worse. And so it goes from heart issue to external to now it's impacting how people see you everywhere. This is the process of anger, right? Because anger, again, it's just a thing that overtakes us rather than dealing with it. So he says, this is going to be the process through which you're dealt with when it comes to anger. First, you'll be taken before the judge and deal with it before the judge. If you don't deal with it before the judge, then the judge will hand you over to the officer. If you don't deal with it with the officer, then the officer is going to put you in jail. Well, the mature person in front of the judge accuses themselves, not their brother.
Yeah.
That's the response, right? It says, well, because now we go back to the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. I accuse myself because I recognize I'm not perfect. I've obtained mercy, so I'm merciful. So if I accuse myself before the judge rather than my brother before the judge lets me off. But if I accuse my brother, the judge gives me to the officer. And so when I'm with the officer, now I have another recourse. I have another response. And so I can appeal to the goodness of the officer. But if I don't appeal to the goodness of the officer and I let the bitterness towards the judge and the bitterness towards the person go deeper, I end up in prison, right? Yeah. So now we're going through stages of anger that turns into bitterness, and bitterness that turns into resentment.
And see, those are all heart states, everybody.
And those are all heart states, exactly. Every one of them is a heart state. And every one of them, there's an invitation to respond. The mature person in anger will be before the judge and accuse themselves rather than accusing their brother, because I am turned to mercy and I'm merciful and I see God and now I'm a peacemaker, right? So that's maturity. But when I lack maturity, then I accuse my brother and I'm before the officer. Now, if I catch it, if I go, oh my goodness, I don't want to be here, and I try to catch bitterness before it actually takes root, then I might get out of the prison. But if I get to the prison, resentment in the prison is very difficult to break yourself out of. Again, we have to go back to stage 1, blessed are the poor in spirit. So going back to what Murray said, the way to deal with being in the prison because of anger is almsgiving. So this is how do I break my heart from resentment? Well, I give to the poor. I start to recognize that my life can be a blessing to others. Now that starts to soften my heart because I see the impact I can have upon others, and I'm starting to witness in real time the presence of Jesus touching the hearts of others. So to get out of the prison of resentment, I practice almsgiving. Okay. So, and then to get away from the officer, I practice fasting. I have to start thinking about what I need. I have to start thinking about my lack. I have to start thinking about oh my goodness, this is where it's going to. So I start to deal with my inner cravings. And so in order to then now the judge to get, so to break for myself from bitterness, right? Which is the second stage there, the heart stage, fasting. To deal with anger in the first place is prayer, because now I'm petitioning the judge and giving myself to the judge, reminding myself of his goodness, reminding myself of his tenderness, reminding myself of his mercy. So this is the practices of the church, things like Maria said, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving are directly related to the teachings of Jesus. And the teachings of Jesus in the Beatitudes tell us about heart states that we enter into. So how do these things help us? Well, they soften our heart depending on the stage that our heart is at. Now, almsgiving you don't ever move past the need to care for the poor. But once your heart is broken open, it's hard, it's bitter, it's resentful, it's in the prison of anger because people have wronged it. Now I start doing good to others and I start going, oh my goodness, my life can be a blessing. So I actually start to incorporate that on a daily rhythm type of thing. And so now I'm like, okay, how do I help others as a lifestyle now? Rather than, now I'm not just trying to get out of prison, I'm actually trying to live a life that is a life of a peacemaker and a life of one who's persecuted and gains the kingdom of heaven. So heart states, and depending on the hardness of the heart, the depravity of the heart, or the softness of the heart, the kinds of disciplines that the church has recommended in Christian history and that Jesus recommends, like, okay, if you're before the judge, prayer, right? Petition the judge. If you're before the officer, weaken yourself, show him your lack. If you're in the prison, think about others and how you can benefit others, right? Like this, it's so germane to the teaching. But if we never even think about it, we just go, oh, anger, I'm hooped, right? So just don't be angry, right? Well, no, Jesus is actually teaching you how to deal with anger and how to move through, or come to a place of deep maturity where you actually look like the Father. So all of Matthew 5 is really about pointing your gaze back to the Father, because the whole context, again, is the very last verse: be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That word perfect, again, like I said, means to be complete or mature. So how do I become complete and perfect like he is? I look at him and the way that he is, and then I begin to live that out in the day-to-day. And this is what it looks like. Practically, Jesus is saying to look like God in the day-to-day is, don't lust after another person. If lust is a thing, you need to deal with that, right? He's not saying, okay, here's all the do's and don'ts. He's saying, this is what a life will reflect when its gaze is reoriented to the Father. And then you get, of course, the whole thing kind of culminates in, like, you're anxious for all these things, but be anxious for nothing. And like, I love it. Be anxious for not just, okay, I need to try not to be anxious, but he says, seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things he's already talked about, right? Matthew 5, 6, and 7.
Yes.
Seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness. So reorienting your gaze to the Father, and all these things that we've talked about will be added to you. The context is looking at him. Now this is what the lifestyle looks like. And these are the stages of the heart. And this is how prayer and fasting and acts of mercy and kindness. That's what we mean by almsgiving, by the way, acts of mercy and kindness. We don't mean giving your tithe to a church.
Yeah.
But that could be a thing, right? That's
could be part of it.
It could be part of it, but that's not what we mean by almsgiving. Acts of mercy and kindness, doing things that are kind-hearted towards others, and that softens the heart. So reorient your gaze, and everything else looks like that, because your heart's become hard. And so the whole goal, I think, is summed up in the two statements of Jesus: seek his kingdom and his righteousness, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. There's theosis, by the way, because he's calling you to
there
look
it
like
is.
the
We're back
Father.
there again.
In the words of Jesus, he's calling you to look like the Father. So he's calling you to be a partaker of the divine nature, kingdom and righteousness. He's calling you to look like God. He became like us that we might become like him. He became poor for our sakes that we might become rich in him. So that's theosis right there in the words of Jesus. And he couches it all under very practical explanation of heart stages, heart hardness, bitterness, sensitivity, and what the journey looks like.
Amazing. I'm going to have to listen to this all again myself, just to like, oh my goodness. Yeah. It's funny, everybody, just as you listen to that, you realize that again, when you're doing these things, you're learning to pay attention to what's going on in your own heart when you're giving. What's happening to you? It's funny. I took my son Simeon. He was 16, and we had to get his driver's license. And it was right when Christmas, or somewhere where it's going to snow. And he goes, you know what? It's going to snow. Fiery tempered redheaded guy. And he's like, oh, I bet you it's going to be closed. And I bet you, oh, it's gonna. I'm like, just calm down. It's going to be okay. But sure enough, it snowed. We drove all the way out to the place, and we were going to take it in a different town. So we, drove about half an hour to get there. And we get to the office of, where the driver's license place, and it's closed, and he is so angry. They did this on purpose, and now I'm not going to get my license. And, he's freaking out. So I said, okay, let's go to Tim Hortons, our local drive-through coffee shop. Let's get a coffee. So we get there, and there, as we're going through the drive-through, there's this guy, kind of disheveled, sitting in the snow with his dog, with a sign that says, help, please. And Simeon looks at him and goes, Dad, can we buy that guy some food? I said, okay. So we go through the drive through a second time, and we get a sandwich and something. And Simeon gets out of the car and walks down and sits with this guy in the snow. He's 16. Gives him the sandwich, pets his dog. He gets back into the car, a completely different kid. And I go, Simeon, do you realize how angry you were? He goes, boy, I was angry. How you feeling now? I just am at peace now. Because he pastored his own heart there.
Yeah.
And we just got to learn how to see it, right? That our outward things are not just outward things. Yeah. They're actually affecting our own deep heart to encounter the Lord. And anyway, I thought a good little story to sum all that interchange up.
That's a great, because the more you practice it, these random acts of kindness, the daily rhythm of prayer, spending time offering your heart to the Father in silence and solitude, which we can talk more about these things, and fasting.
Absolutely. We need to break this down way more.
We can make it. We can. The quicker you move through the maturation process that I laid out in the Beatitudes. So like Simeon, it happened very quickly, right? So he got to almsgiving, right? That's an act of mercy. And then he went through poor in spirit, and he went all the way through peacemaker. Right?
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. I thought of it that way.
Yeah, just because the more we practice it, the more it becomes who we are. Again, reorienting our gaze to the Father, we begin to look like him, and this is what a lifestyle looks like. Well, Murray, we've been going for a long time, so we're gonna call the episode a wrap at that point.
Yeah, we're gonna call it right there. We've got lots
of right there.
Stirred up so many good things to keep talking about.
We have more we'll talk about. We have another episode coming out in 2 weeks, and so the feedback has been wonderful so far.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's good for us to know somebody's really listening.
People are being impacted, and
it affects my heart.
Yeah, that's right. Our meandering talks have been very helpful for people. So we really appreciate the feedback. And you can follow everything Murray does at samuelsmantle.com or search for Murray Duick on Facebook. You can find everything I do at windministries.ca, WIND ministries.ca, or search for Joshua Hofford on Facebook, Instagram. You're on Instagram, right, Murray?
No, I'm not. I should be, but
yeah, you should be. So you're on TikTok, probably, right?
No, I just on Facebook and the web, and that's it right now. Yeah, I mean, I should, but yeah, it'll happen.
Put the link in the episode description, so you can find out more about what we're doing there. And but awesome to spend time with Murray, with you, and then with everybody that's listening. Just so appreciate everybody. So.
Thank you all. Thanks, Josh.
Next time. Yes, we'll chat. Bye, everybody.